Hello, this is Rob Bovarnick from Bovarnick and Associates in Philadelphia, and this is another in the long line of legal tips for people out there. Today what we're going to talk about is something called piercing the corporate veil, or in other words, what do you do when you're owed money from a corporation and you want to collect, but you're afraid that the corporation does not have any money because the cash flow is poor or because there are just no real assets there. Are you stuck? No, you're not necessarily stuck. You may be able to go after the principles of the company under a number of different theories. Now, you have to remember first that the reason people incorporate is to protect themselves from liability for corporate obligations, and generally that is sacrosanct. However, there are a few exceptions to that rule. The first exception is called piercing the corporate veil. And the way to look at that is if you look at the corporation, and if it's set up as a sham, if it's undercapitalized, if it was set up as a fraud, anything along those lines, or something else that's a good tip-off, if the corporation is using the corporate monies to pay the personal debts of the principals, then you may be able to sue the individuals by piercing the corporate veil. Another way to go about getting your money back from the principals is a theory called participation. Participation is a fancy word, really meaning fraud. If I was the principal of a company and I had another shareholder, another partner, and I dealt with you and I wanted your product or your service, but I always knew that I was never going to pay you, you would have a direct claim against me. You would not have a direct claim against my other shareholder or my other partner, because that individual did not commit any fraud as against you. I'm the only one that did that, so your claim would be against me. It's sort of an end run against the company, or around the company to the individual, as opposed to piercing the corporate veil, which is going straight through. And in the piercing the corporate veil context, you can go after anybody who is a principal of the company. One of the other things that you need to remember is there's some other things in the corporate setting, breaches of fiduciary duty, breaches of loyalty, and things like that. Those generally occur within the corporate context, so you as a vendor would not necessarily have a claim for a breach of that type of duty against the principals. But if you're a part of the company, you may have a claim against one of your fellow shareholders for breach of fiduciary duty or breach of loyalty. The other thing to bear in mind is something called the zone of insolvency. And the zone of insolvency really deals with the obligations of directors or principals of companies as a company gets closer and closer into a bankrupt situation. Think about it this way. If I have a company and my company is doing worse and worse and worse, and I know that, and I know that I can't pay the debts, and then I say to you, well, I still want to buy your product, recognizing that there is not a great likelihood of my being able to pay, I'm approaching what is called the zone of insolvency. The duty that normally runs to the shareholders or the owners of a corporation is now shifting, and it shifts to the creditors of the corporation. And it's a scale. So the closer the company comes to being bankrupt or in trouble, the greater that zone of insolvency becomes. So those are just a few thoughts on how you can go after the principals of the company when you're owed money by the company. Thank you.